Video sweeping social media. Is that really Elvis Presley? The tall man with white hair, a white beard, and dark sunglasses? Yes, the truth is getting out. Elvis is alive.
For 48 years, a freezer sat silent in Elvis's basement at Graceland. Just before his death, Elvis locked something inside and never spoke of it. When it was finally opened, strong smells filled the room and guards turned away. What did Elvis hide? And why did he want Lisa Marie to find it? Stay with us to find out. The locked basement. The clock showed 2:30 in the morning when Marcus Williams noticed something strange. He had been working security at Graceland for 15 years, walking these same hallways every night. But tonight was different. Marcus stopped in the basement corridor and stared at the floor. A thin line of frost stretched from beneath a locked door he had passed 1,000 times before. The ice crystals caught the dim light and sparkled like tiny diamonds on the concrete floor. He knelt down and touched the frost with his fingertips. It was real, cold, fresh. Something behind that door was leaking freezing air into the hallway. Marcus stood up and pulled out his flashlight. The beam landed on an old padlock securing the door. The lock looked ancient, covered in dust and rust. Nobody had opened this door in decades. He had never even thought about what was inside. A strange smell lingered in the air. Marcus had noticed it before over the years, but tonight it seemed stronger. It was unpleasant, like something old and forgotten. Staff members always walked quickly past this section of the basement. Nobody liked being down here. Marcus radioed his supervisor. Within an hour, the head of security arrived at Graceland. They checked the power records together in the maintenance office. What they discovered made Marcus's heart race. An industrial freezer had been installed in that basement room in 1976. The power meter showed it had been running continuously ever since. For 48 years, electricity had been flowing to that freezer without stopping. Not even for a single day. The electricity bills were even more mysterious. They were not paid by the Graceland estate or the museum. Instead, the money came from a private trust fund that had been set up decades ago. Someone wanted that freezer running no matter what. Marcus and his supervisor discussed what to do next. This was Elvis Presley's home. The king of rock and roll had passed away in 1977, just 1 year after that freezer was installed. Graceland had opened as a museum in 1982, welcoming millions of fans from around the world, but certain areas had always remained off-limits to the public. This basement was one of those secret places. Elvis had been obsessed with privacy during his final years. The people closest to him, his inner circle called the Memphis Mafia, were fiercely loyal. They protected his secrets with their lives. Elvis trusted very few people near the end. He was paranoid about the world discovering certain truths about his life. Whatever was in that freezer, Elvis had wanted it hidden. He had wanted it kept cold, and he had wanted it preserved for nearly half a century. Marcus and his supervisor made the decision. They needed to open that door. They needed to see what was inside. Marcus fetched a pair of heavy bolt cutters from the maintenance room. His hands shook slightly as he positioned the cutters around the old padlock. The metal was thick and stubborn. He squeezed with all his strength. The lock resisted at first, then suddenly gave way with a loud crack that echoed through the basement. Marcus pulled the broken lock free and tossed it aside. He grabbed the door handle and pulled. The door opened slowly, scraping against the floor. A blast of freezing air rushed out, hitting him in the face like an Arctic wind. Then came the smell. It was overwhelming, powerful, unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced in his 15 years at Graceland. His stomach turned violently. He stumbled backward, his hand flying up to cover his mouth and nose. His supervisor turned away, coughing and gagging. Through watering eyes, Marcus could see inside the room. A large industrial freezer stood against the far wall, humming quietly. Its door was slightly open now, having been disturbed by the pressure change. Something had been hidden in that freezer for 48 years. Something Elvis Presley had locked away just before he passed away. And now, finally, after all this time, the truth was about to come out. What Marcus saw inside that freezer would change everything the world thought it knew about Elvis. But first, they needed to understand why the king had hidden these secrets in the first place. His final year was filled with pain, fear, and desperate choices that nobody could have imagined. Elvis's final year. To understand what was hidden in that freezer, we need to go back to Elvis Presley's last months alive. The year was 1976, turning into 1977. The world still saw Elvis as the king, but behind closed doors at Graceland, something terrible was happening. Elvis was sick, very sick. His weight had climbed to over 250 pounds. His face was puffy and swollen. His body was failing him in ways that terrified him. He had liver damage, high blood pressure, and his colon had grown to twice its normal size. He could barely walk some days. The pain was constant, but the worst problem was the pills. Elvis was addicted to prescription medications, and everyone around him knew it. His doctor, George Nicopolis, had been giving him medications for years: Dilaudid for pain, Percodan for more pain, Demerol to help him sleep, codeine for his cough. The list went on and on. Elvis was taking thousands of pills every month. He had pills to wake up, pills to perform, pills to sleep, and pills to handle the side effects of other pills. It was a nightmare cycle that was slowly eliminating him. The strange thing was that Elvis knew exactly what was happening to his body. He spent hours reading medical books in his bedroom. He studied his symptoms. He understood that he was dying. This obsession with his own mortality consumed him during his final months. But Elvis had another fear that was even stronger than his fear of death. He was terrified of what people would think of him after he was gone. The king of rock and roll could not be remembered as a medication addict. He could not let his perfect image be destroyed. This fear drove many of his decisions in those last months. The people closest to Elvis were called the Memphis Mafia. They were his friends, bodyguards, and companions. Men like Red West, Sonny West, and Joe Esposito had been with Elvis for years. Their job was to protect him and keep his secret safe. But in 1977, something happened that broke Elvis's heart. Red West and Sonny West, two of his oldest friends, were fired from his team. They were angry and hurt, so they wrote a book called Elvis: What Happened. The book told the truth about Elvis's medication problems and strange behavior. When Elvis found out about the book, he was devastated. The betrayal cut him deeply. It made him trust people even less than before. He became more secretive, more paranoid, and more isolated. He started making plans, giving instructions to his father Vernon Presley about certain arrangements that needed to be made. Money was another huge problem. Elvis was one of the most famous people in the world, but he was running out of cash. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, was taking 50% of everything Elvis earned. This was far more than any normal manager would take. Elvis had expensive habits and a mansion full of people depending on him. Despite performing constantly, the debts kept growing. Elvis worried constantly about his daughter, Lisa Marie. She was only 9 years old. What would happen to her after he was gone? He made secret financial arrangements to protect her future. The timeline of his final months tells a tragic story. In June of 1977, Elvis went into the recording studio for the last time. His voice was weak and strained. The magic was fading. By July, he had withdrawn almost completely into Graceland. He barely left his bedroom. During this time, he gave specific instructions about the basement freezer. Then came August 16, 1977. Elvis Presley was found dead in his bathroom at Graceland. He was only 42 years old. The official cause of death was listed as a heart problem. But the truth was much more complicated. What nobody knew was that Elvis had been preparing for this moment. He had been documenting everything, saving evidence, making sure that someday, when the time was right, the real story would come out. That freezer in the basement was part of his plan. He knew he was going to pass on. He knew people would cover up the truth, and he knew that one day, Someone would open that freezer and discover what he had left behind. Now, 48 years later, that moment had finally arrived. The discovery. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the freezer entrance, her flashlight shaking in her gloved hand. Inside, stacked carefully like precious cargo, were industrial plastic containers. Each one was labeled in handwriting that the world would recognize instantly. Elvis Presley had written these labels himself. The dates range from 1975 to August 15, 1977, just one day before Elvis passed away. He had been storing things in this freezer right up until his final hours on Earth. Dr. Chen carefully began removing items. Her team gathered around, documenting everything with cameras. The first thing she pulled out was a leather journal, frozen solid. Ice crystals covered its surface like a protective shield. Next came waterproof bags filled with medical documents, test results, doctor's notes, and handwritten records. Elvis had been keeping track of everything, but what came next made everyone go silent. Clear plastic bags filled with prescription pill bottles, hundreds of them. The bottles had different names. Some had Elvis's name, some had his staff members' names, some had fake names. A few bottles even had Lisa Marie's name, though she was just a child. Elvis had been using his daughter's name to get more medications. The sheer number was shocking. This proved Elvis's addiction had been far worse than anyone publicly knew. The bottles came from different doctors in different states. This was organized and systematic. Then Dr. Chen found something that explained why Marcus had gotten sick. Sealed medical vials containing blood samples. Elvis had been drawing his own blood and freezing it. Labels on each vial showed dates and notes about testing. More containers held private medical test results. The results showed liver failure and kidney problems. Elvis had known exactly how sick he was. He had been monitoring his own death. This explained the terrible smell. Biological samples frozen for nearly 50 years. When the freezer opened, decades of decomposition hit the air. Personal items filled lower containers. Bags of hair samples, each labeled with dates. Elvis had been tracking how his hair changed as his body deteriorated. Pieces of clothing had dark bloodstains from nosebleeds he suffered constantly. Handwritten notes described symptoms, pain levels, dizzy spells, memory problems. Elvis had been documenting his own decline like a scientist studying a fatal disease. A tape recorder sat in one container, surrounded by frozen cassettes. Each tape was carefully labeled. Some said medical symptoms, others said conversations. One tape was labeled, "The Night Before." Dr. Chen found the journal again and began thawing it carefully. As ice melted, she could see words on the first page. Words like insurance and the truth. Phrases like, "When I am gone and Lisa Marie must know." There were names of people Elvis had trusted to help create this frozen time capsule. The basement was immediately sealed as a crime scene. This was no longer just historical. There was evidence of medical malpractice, proof of illegal prescription practices, documents that could destroy reputations decades later. Security called Priscilla Presley and Lisa Marie Presley. The FBI was contacted because evidence suggested federal crimes. Lawyers for the Presley estate rushed to Graceland. As Dr. Chen continued working, she noticed something taped to the journal's back, a sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed but perfectly preserved by the cold. Written across the front in Elvis's handwriting were words that made everyone stop. The letter and recordings. Lisa Marie Presley walked through Graceland's gates 48 hours after the freezer opened. She was 57 years old, but in that moment, she felt like a little girl again. The last time she saw her father, she was 9. Now she was about to hear from him in an impossible way. Her relationship with her father's memory had always been complicated. For decades, she defended Elvis against accusations. She fought people who called him a medication addict. But Lisa Marie had her own demons. She had struggled with addiction herself. She understood that darkness. Recently, she had been dealing with financial troubles involving Graceland. And now this discovery added another painful layer. Dr. Chen handed Lisa Marie white gloves. The envelope Elvis sealed 48 years ago sat on a table. FBI agents stood nearby. Lawyers watched. Cameras recorded everything. This moment would become history. Lisa Marie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter on Graceland stationery. The date read August 15th, 1977. Her father wrote this the day before he passed away. As Lisa Marie read, tears streamed down her face. Elvis admitted he had taken approximately 19,000 doses of medication in just the last 7 months of his life. This was a fact later verified by medical experts. He listed names of doctors who overprescribed medications. Some were still alive. Others had passed away years ago. Elvis wanted the truth recorded. He wanted people held accountable, even if it took decades. The letter explained that Elvis knew he was eliminating himself, but could not stop. The addiction was too powerful. His body was too damaged. He was trapped in a cycle that would only end one way. What broke Lisa Marie's heart most was reading about her father's fear. He was terrified the truth would destroy his image. He was scared she would hate him. He was angry at Colonel Parker for pushing him to perform when he could barely stand. The letter ended with words that would stay with Lisa Marie forever. He was preserving this evidence so the truth would survive, even if he did not. After reading, Dr. Chen played the cassette tapes. The first was Elvis describing symptoms in his own voice: chest pains, difficulty breathing, extreme fatigue. His voice sounded tired and sad. Another tape captured Elvis confronting a doctor about his deteriorating condition. The doctor tried to reassure him, but Elvis knew his body was shutting down. There was a recording of Elvis talking with his father, Vernon, about Lisa Marie's future. He made Vernon promise to take care of her. The most heartbreaking tape was labeled "The Night Before." Elvis recorded himself on August 15th, hours before his death. His voice was slurred and struggling. He sounded exhausted and defeated. He talked about being so tired, about wanting to rest. The containers held photographs Elvis took of himself, private images showing his physical decline, his face swelling, his body gaining weight, bruises that would not heal. He documented his daily pill regimen with photographs, piles of pills taken every day just to function. Medical documents proved doctors warned Elvis he was near death. Letters recommended hospital treatment, but Elvis refused. He would not risk the media discovering how sick he was. His management knew everything but did nothing. Elvis predicted the official cause of death would be covered up. He had been right. For 48 years, the world believed a sanitized version. As Lisa Marie finished reviewing everything, Dr. Chen showed her one final item. At the freezer's bottom was a sealed metal box with a note attached: "The Darker Truths." Opening the metal box required specialized equipment. The lock had been frozen solid for 48 years. When it finally clicked open, Lisa Marie held her breath. What her father had hidden inside would expose the people who destroyed him. Financial documents filled the top of the box. They showed how Colonel Tom Parker had been stealing from Elvis for decades. Contracts that Elvis signed while heavily medicated. Papers he agreed to when he was too induced to understand what he was signing. Parker had controlled everything, including Elvis's medical care, to keep him performing no matter what. The documents revealed Parker's secret gambling debts. He owed huge amounts of money to casinos. The only way to pay those debts was to keep Elvis on stage night after night, even when Elvis was dying. Parker did not care about Elvis's health. He only cared about money. The most shocking discovery was proof that Colonel Tom Parker was not even American. His real name was Andreas Cornelis van Kook. He was an illegal immigrant from the Netherlands with no legal right to work in the United States. This explained why Parker always refused international tours for Elvis. He could not leave the country because he would not be allowed back in. While Elvis was nearly broke and drowning in debt, Parker was getting rich. Parker took 50% of everything Elvis earned. Normal managers take 10 to 15%. Parker was robbing Elvis blind. The box contained Elvis's personal log of every doctor who prescribed him medications. Names, dates, and pill counts were all documented. Some prescriptions were written in his staff members' names. Elvis had been pharmacy shopping across multiple states. Doctors were paid extra money to not ask questions. This system allowed Elvis to get thousands of pills every single month. There were contracts in the box that required Elvis to perform even when he was medically unable. Doctors' notes clearly stated Elvis was unfit to perform. Those notes were ignored. Financial obligations had trapped Elvis in a death cycle. There was evidence of performances where Elvis was barely conscious on stage. Nobody stopped it because too many people were making money. Elvis had considered checking into a long-term treatment facility. He had made plans for a comeback after getting clean. There were letters he never sent to Lisa Marie explaining everything. A different will than his official one showed what Elvis really wanted for his future. All of these dreams passed away with him. The documents showed that Vernon Presley knew what was happening but felt powerless to stop it. Family members were benefiting financially from Elvis continuing to perform. People who tried to help were shut out by Elvis himself. He had created his own isolation, and it eliminated him. The final pages were the most heartbreaking. Elvis kept an hour-by-hour log of his last week alive. He knew death was coming. He wrote about his decision to create the freezer archive as his true testament. He selected specific trusted individuals to maintain the freezer. His instructions were clear. Wait until Lisa Marie was old enough and strong enough to handle the truth. At the bottom of the box was a notarized legal statement dated August 10, 1977, just 6 days before Elvis passed away. The document stated that if these contents were ever discovered, Elvis wanted criminal charges brought against those responsible for his condition. Then came the list of names. Some were redacted for legal reasons, but one name stood out clearly, written in Elvis's angry handwriting: Colonel Tom Parker. The aftermath. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Within hours, every news channel in the world was covering it. Headlines screamed the impossible truth. Elvis predicted his own death. The King's secret evidence exposed after 48 years. The freezer that changed everything. Social media exploded. The freezer discovery became the biggest story of the year. People compared Elvis's situation to Michael Jackson, who passed away from prescription medications in 2009. They talked about Prince, who overdosed on pain medication in 2016. The medical community was forced to confront the prescription medication epidemic that had been eliminating people for decades. 3 days after the discovery, Lisa Marie Presley held a press conference at Graceland. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was strong. She stood before cameras from around the world and read portions of her father's letter. She explained how his confession had helped her understand her own struggles with addiction. The demons she inherited from him finally made sense. Lisa Marie forgave her father completely, but she condemned everyone who exploited him. She called for accountability in the medical profession. She demanded that doctors face consequences when they enable addiction for profit. Her words were powerful and emotional. The Presley estate immediately began cooperating with authorities. Dr. George Nicopolis had passed away in 2016. Colonel Parker had passed away in 1997. But their estates could still face scrutiny. Legal experts debated whether any crimes could still be prosecuted after so many years. Graceland announced plans for a new exhibit about Elvis's struggle with addiction. They partnered with addiction treatment organizations across the country. The goal was to turn Elvis's tragedy into education that could save lives. Fan reactions were mixed and emotional. Some fans were angry that the truth had been revealed. They wanted to remember Elvis as the perfect king, not as a man who struggled with addiction. But most fans were grateful for the honesty. They said they loved Elvis even more now that they understood his pain. The conspiracy theorists who spent decades claiming Elvis was still alive had to reconsider everything. The freezer contents proved Elvis knew he was dying. He documented it himself. There was no faking his death, just a man preparing for the inevitable. Fans gained a new understanding of Elvis's final performances. Videos from his last concerts showed him forgetting lyrics, stumbling on stage, and looking exhausted. People had laughed at those moments. Now they watched with tears, seeing a man fighting to survive. Addiction specialists studied the freezer contents and explained how classic Elvis's situation was. He was surrounded by enablers, people who benefited from keeping him sick. Wealth and fame had created dangerous isolation. Nobody could reach him to help. Medical historians put the situation in context. In the 1970s, prescription medications were not monitored like they are today. Doctors could prescribe whatever they wanted. There were no databases tracking patients. The culture viewed prescription medications as safe medicine, not dangerous like street medications. Colonel Parker's exploitation was fully exposed to the world. People debated whether he should have faced criminal charges when he was alive. His immigration fraud was revealed. He had lied about his identity for decades. Current holders of his estate publicly distanced themselves from his actions. Graceland underwent a transformation. The basement freezer was preserved behind glass as historical evidence. New exhibits told honest stories about Elvis's real life. Educational programs about addiction were created. Tour guides no longer sugar-coated the truth. The cultural impact was enormous. Conversations started about how society treats celebrities. The prescription medication epidemic's roots in cases like Elvis were discussed. People debated the responsibility of doctors treating famous patients. The difference between image and reality in celebrity culture became a major topic. 1 year after the discovery, a special exhibition opened at Graceland. Visitors could view the preserved freezer behind protective glass. They could read Elvis's own words about his battle with addiction. The final display in the exhibition showed a quote that broke hearts around the world. "I fought harder than anyone will ever know. I just didn't fight soon enough." Legacy redefined. The medical truth could no longer be denied. Elvis's official cause of death had been listed as cardiac arrhythmia, which means an irregular heartbeat. But the freezer contents proved the real cause was prescription medication toxicity. 14 different medications were in his system when he passed away. His body had finally given up. The autopsy revealed his colon was twice its normal size because of chronic opioid use. He suffered from bone disease, severe liver damage, and glaucoma. All of this had been covered up initially to protect his image. Now, 48 years later, Elvis's own documentation confirmed everything. The discovery changed how people understood celebrity culture in the 1970s. Back then, famous people could easily get prescriptions from multiple doctors. There were no computer databases to track medications. Society viewed prescription medications as completely safe, unlike street medications. Many people passed away because of this dangerous thinking. Cases like Elvis's eventually influenced legislation changes. Prescription monitoring programs were created. Doctors faced more oversight. But these changes came too late for Elvis and many others. The freezer revealed the complete extent of Colonel Parker's betrayal. He had embezzled money while Elvis was alive. He sold Elvis's music royalty rights for quick cash instead of protecting long-term income. He deliberately isolated Elvis from people who wanted to help him. He encouraged Elvis's medication dependency because a sick, dependent Elvis was easier to control. Surviving members of the Memphis Mafia finally spoke publicly about their guilt. They admitted obtaining prescriptions in their own names for Elvis to use. They confessed to enabling his isolation and medication use. Some had tried to help but were pushed away. They had lived with decades of guilt, knowing they could have done more. What Elvis left behind was more than evidence. It was a gift to future generations. His documentation was meant to save other people from the same fate. His instructions explained exactly how he wanted his story told. He wanted Lisa Marie to understand that addiction is a disease, not a moral failure. He hoped his legacy would include both his triumphs and his tragedies. For Lisa Marie, her father's archive became a path to healing. Understanding his battle helped her understand her own addiction. She became a public advocate for addiction treatment. She made careful decisions about what to reveal and what to keep private. The truth brought her more peace than decades of mystery ever could. Music historians recognize that Elvis's death predicted later tragedies. Michael Jackson, Prince, Tom Petty, Whitney Houston. The music industry continued failing to protect its artists. But Elvis's freezer discovery sparked real changes. Tour managers began monitoring artist health more carefully. Record labels created support systems. The conversation finally started. Graceland transformed from a simple museum into an educational institution. Programs were created for young musicians about protecting themselves from exploitation. Medical professionals received training about treating celebrity patients ethically. Addiction recovery meetings were held on the grounds where Elvis once lived. All the conspiracy theories were finally put to rest. Elvis was not alive. His own documentation proved he knew he was dying. There was no assassination plot, just systematic enabling by people who should have protected him. His prediction that the truth would be covered up had fueled decades of conspiracy theories. Now everyone understood why. Elvis's humanity was restored. He was no longer a punchline about dying on a toilet. He was understood as a victim of addiction and a broken system. People recognized his decades-long battle. They appreciated how long he survived under impossible circumstances. His courage in documenting the truth for future generations was finally honored.